Timely Greetings, Volume 1, Number 1. Study by VTH, Mount Carmel Chapel, Sabbath, August 3, 1946. Mount Carmel Center, Waco, Texas. My study this afternoon is the way back to Eden. We shall now read from Genesis 3:17. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. What did the Lord say to Adam after he fell into sin? Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, did what you ought not, and hast eaten the fruit of which I forbid you eating. For this cause cursed is the ground, not against you, but for your sake. As truth is the opposite of error, had error spoken, it would have said, Blessed is the ground for your sake. And instead of saying, In sorrow shalt thou eat of all the days of thy life, error would have said, In pleasure shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. In other words, while God pronounces a curse, Satan pronounces a blessing. Being tuned to Satan's speech, the world expects to live in pleasure all its days. Nevertheless, it is having plenty of sorrow, plenty of it. Verse 18. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. The devil would have said, Roses and flowers shalt it bring unto thee, and instead of commanding, Thou shalt eat of the herbs of the field, he would have said, Thou shalt eat of everything you find in the field. He does not say so in a book, but he does say it in the hearts of all living, and they zealously obey his voice. Verse 19. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground. For it wast. Sorry, just 1 second. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. What? In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat the bread all the days of thy life? That is, for your own sake, you are now to have hardship in making a living, and you might just as well reconcile yourself to it. These words simply imply that this was not man's lot before he sinned, but that it became his lot as soon as he was taken out of the garden, as soon as he earned it. But, you say, why did God purpose it that all of us should go through hardship and sorrow before we are taken back into Eden? If he is to take us back, why did he not do it in the beginning, in Adam's days? The answer to these questions is found in Luke 15, verses 11 and 12. And he said, A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. Let us comment a little on this story. There were 2 sons in the family. The older one chose to stay home, but the younger one chose to go away. What happened? Shortly afterward, he wasted all his substance in riotous living. I am sure that the father knew that his son was headed for waste and hardship. The fact that on the boy's return, the father met him while yet a long way off, and made a banquet for him, even after he had wasted his father's substance and disgraced his own and his father's name, is evidence enough that the father loved the boy supremely. The boy was allowed to leave home only because nothing but experience could ever demonstrate him his folly and the father's love for him. What forced the boy to dislike home? Was it not his desire to live riotously? No boy or girl leaves but for freedom, to do at will what the carnal heart is longing to do. Riotous living, yes. There may be lots of fun in it. If that boy were living in our day, what do you suppose he would do to start out on the highway of fun, to have a good time? The first thing, for sure, would be to buy, if possible, an automobile, fine clothes, a diamond ring, a pin, and a wristwatch. He would not neglect to put a flower in his lapel and a silk handkerchief in his pocket. There may be nothing wrong in having some of these things, but it certainly is not commendable to put on oneself anything that can be put on. It is superfluous to deck oneself in peacock fashion. And whom would he take for rides? The ladies, of course. And where would they go? Not where the preachers go, and not to the church either. Verse 14. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. If you spend all, you too will have famine. I suppose, though, that Providence brought the famine in order to bring the boy to himself. No boy or girl leaves home when he is himself, neither does he return home understandingly before he comes to himself. He learns his lesson, but at what a cost! Yes, at what a cost! Verses 15 and 16. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. He got a job all right, but it did not fill the bill, for he was still wanting. Then he began to reason with himself, how many servants are in my father's house, and why should I perish with hunger? He finally discovered that he had played the fool, and so he began to reason with himself about going back home. But what is he to say when he gets there? Having come to himself, he of course must say the right thing, the thing that would commend him to heaven as well as to his father. Verses 17 to 19. How many hired servants of my father's house have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. What a priceless lesson! But at what a great cost! There are many, young and old alike, who learn great lessons, but they often pay a tremendous price. Had that boy taken his father's counsel in the first place, he would not have had to eat that humble pie. Oh, what a pie! And what a lesson, too, not only for the young, but for the old also. There are thousands who are ever listening to that old deceitful humbug. Why are they easily carried away with his allurements? Only because of his attractive bait that appeals to man's selfish nature. The prodigal's humiliation awaits all the young who do not accept the counsel of the old, and all the old who do not honestly accept the counsel of the Lord. This is one of the laws which God. This is one of the laws of God. No one has ever been able to dodge. The prodigal's experience has now answered the question: why did not God take Adam back? Why did he move out of the garden to begin with? Why did God not forgive him shortly after his fall, since he has to forgive him someday, and take him back to Eden anyway? Why could not all mankind have been thus saved from going through misery and death? Had God let Adam and Eve remain in the garden after they sinned and before they saw their folly, by hard experience as did the prodigal, and had God let them partake of the tree of life, he would have perpetuated their lives in their sinful state. What a terrible thing that would have been! Sinners having to live forever and ever? If the Lord could not forgive Adam and Eve, and let them continue to live in the garden then, did he have to curse the ground and cause them to earn their bread with the sweat of their brow? And did he have to make them eat their bread in sorrow too? And why let us go on in sorrow for 6,000 years? The answer to these questions is this: all who are ever to enter the kingdom, get back into Eden, must come to themselves as did the prodigal, through hunger and hardship, and must come to realize that everything away from the garden is nothing more than swine's husks. Because many people by nature dislike work, the thorns and thistles compel them to work hard for their living. If we leave the obnoxious weeds in the ground and spend our time having fun, they will choke out the crops, and we too will have a famine. Thus, no work, no eat. Yes, we can have fun, riotous living, by the sweat on the brows of others. Nevertheless, in due time we shall pay the price for all of our fun. God, who knows what is best for us, made it so that we must make our living the hard way, work for a living all day long, with but little rest. To those who come to themselves, however, work is pleasure. They get all the fun they want while working, doing something that is worth doing and having. Only fools hate work. Before the modern machinery was involved, farmers were not troubled with the pestilence as they are now. And just as the machinery increased and improved, so the bugs did too. Why? To still keep us working, and thus out of mischief. Some years ago, the time I came to the United States, I saw machinery of all sorts, machinery that did a great amount of work in a short time. Such we did not have in the old country. But along with these conveniences, what else did I see? I saw thistles and thorns multiplied 1,000-fold, and pestilence of all kinds devouring the crops. These too have been on the increase ever since. In the old country, we never sprayed anything. Why? Because they had it hard enough as it was, working without machinery. And if they had to fight pestilence besides, and nothing with which to fight either, then of course they would have raised nothing. In other words, when the machinery makes us free of work, God sends the bugs to put us back to work. When the Lord commanded that we should with sweat earn our living, he knew that most men would not if they did not have to. And he also knew that if we did not have much to do, we would get into mischief, into riotous living, and consequently never come to ourselves and never go back to Eden. He therefore cursed the ground for our good. Moreover, to the woman who sits down, doing but little to keep up her home, God brings into her house the bedbugs and the roaches, the mice and the rats, the flies and the ants, yes, the mosquitoes too. These will put her working inside and out, if anything will. If it were not for the pests, what would man be? Even though these pests come to urge some people to get up, start moving and clean up, yet considering that they are human beings, they are almost as bad as pigs. So, you see, God has made all these things for a good purpose. But why should we wait until God sends his great army of pests? Why not take his counsel, keep busy, and do what we can to make others happy, to make the world better than it is, to make it know that we are in it to do it good, not to be a burden upon it. If we make God's business our business, his kingdom our home, then all the other things we are striving for and worrying about will be supplied to us in great abundance. Hence, we should be no longer only Christians outwardly and Gentiles at heart, but rather we should be without guile in our mouths, and with palms in our hands. Why did mankind have to wait 6,000 years before returning to Eden? Because it takes that long to get a large enough number of prodigals who come to themselves, who realize that it is better to be a doorkeeper at home than to be sunk in fun away from home. God is not going to take any of us back into Eden in the state of mind we were born with. No more than he took Adam back into Eden in his fallen state. Now we see why it is easier for a camel to go through the needle's eye than it is for a rich man to get into the kingdom. Only the prodigals, those who, through experience, realize that this world is not their Father's house. Only those who start back home with the same kind of mind and with the same kind of confession as that of the prodigal are to make up the kingdom. Moreover, when the children of Israel went into the land of Egypt, they had fine living in Goshen. They lived like kings, much better than the best of the Egyptians. When the time neared for their deliverance, though, God knew that if they continued to live like kings, that if everything had continued to be as easy for them as while Joseph was alive, they never would have made up their minds to go back to the promised land. But trying providential circumstances caused them to cry day and night for deliverance. Then they were ready to go. To make sure, though, that they all would leave Egypt, the Lord permitted the Egyptian taskmasters to lash their backs, and to make their labor extra hard while Moses was in the land. So the love of the world must be beaten out of us too, if we are ever to start out for the kingdom. Now, if you boys and girls want to have riotous living, you can have it. There's much to be had today. There's much more to be had today than there was to be had in the days of the prodigal. But remember that if you ever get into the kingdom, you must pay the same price he paid. There is to be no free ticket for any, old or young. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 5. The fool foldeth his hands together, and eateth his own flesh. The fool folds his hands together, he despises work. He eats his own flesh. He will even stay hungry rather than to do work, causing his stomach to draw on his reserve fat, and thus to become thinner and thinner. Who wants to be a fool? Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 2 to 4. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. The house of feasting brings the end of all men, all who live for fun, for riotous living. The living will lay it to heart. Those who do not lay it to heart are already dead and need to be revived. Verse 3. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. If you want to have lots of fun, then your heart will someday be sad. But if your heart is sad, you will be made glad. Only a fool chooses to be in a house of mirth. I would rather be in the house of mourning, suffer affliction with the people of God, than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. There were two men who went into partnership after the Lord asked them to move into another land, far away from their homeland. There they became rich, In fact, they got so rich that they had to separate into two companies. The one who chose to live in the hills, who chose to make his living the hard way, proved to be the wiser. But the one who chose to live in the plains, where he could make an easy living, proved to be very foolish. He was the younger, too, you know. He pitched his tent towards Sodom, and the longer he looked at the city, the closer he came to it. He finally decided to move his tent right into it, where he could see it all with ease. He became a great man in Sodom too, the mayor of the city, and thus he sat at the gate of Sodom. Yes, Lot and his family had wonderful, riotous living with the Sodomites, but the fun did not last forever. Overnight, Lot lost everything he ever possessed, and he came out the poorest of the poor. Yes, Lot paid high for his fun. If you want to pay such a price for your fun, you may do likewise. The man from whose writings we are now reading was, you know, and still is, the wisest man the world has ever had. What did he say the fool does? He goes into the house of mirth. Do you want to profit by the experience of others? Do you want to take the wise man's counsel? If you do, then wisdom rests with you. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 18. By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. The slothful man's house decays. His house rots before he has it finished, or before he has it repaired. He is late in everything, yes, a bad habit for one to get into. When you drive out into the country along the roadside, you will notice that the houses which are badly run down and unkept are the houses of those whom you see on the porches rocking away the time when they should be working. But around the houses that are well cared for, you will not see anyone sitting, if you see people at all, and you will see them doing something. What are you doing? Let us again turn to the third chapter of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 17. I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. God is going to judge the wicked and the righteous, because there is a time for every purpose and every work. Everyone is to give an account for his time as well as for his deeds. Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 6. Because to every purpose there is time and judgment, therefore the misery of man is great upon him. Because there is a time for every purpose and every work, there is therefore to be a time of judgment for both the wicked and the righteous. And because there is a time and a season for every purpose, if not heeded to, the misery of man is increased. But to avoid them, we must do everything on time, lest our miseries increase. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 to 8. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. The man, the student, and the little ant, the teacher. What a humiliating statement against the idler. Verses 7 and 8. Which having no guile, overseer, no or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. The ant knows what to do and when to do it. She never fails to make a living. Were you to go down into her house, you would find provisions for more than the season requires. She knows when harvest comes. If a man fails to take notice of the time and of the season, then his miseries as the miseries of any shall increase. Had this counsel come from men, we would perhaps not need it, but it comes from God, from Him who has control of everything. He knows your life from the time you were born to the time you will die. He knows what kind of life you are going through. You may have to go through the prodigal's way, but it would be better if you did not. The best for you is to go the Father's way. The young people know what you adults are doing. They know how much you think about God and His kingdom. They know how much you think of this place and of His work. Since they know all that and much more, then it is time for all of us to know that we cannot lead the children closer to our objectives than we ourselves are. We cannot inspire in them faith and zeal in anything while we ourselves do not have it. My time is gone and I must now close. I do hope, though, that those who are headed for the prodigal's way may come to themselves before the miserable experience comes to them. Though I now part from you, may this lesson ever stay with you. Those who lay the cause of fatigue to hard, steady work are not in disagreement with men, but with the one who created them, with Him who knows all about their physical makeup. Why not take the Lord's counsel and get rid of your ailments? Authorities agree with Dr. Austin F. Riggs. Hard work, plenty of it, whether physical or mental, never in itself produced one single case of nervous exhaustion. Dr. Ira Weil says, unconditionally, there is no such thing as breakdown from overwork. The Reader's Digest, September 1946, page 116. Chronic fatigue is not caused by mental or physical work. Of course, you do get tired from either or from both, but this kind of fatigue is swept out by a night's rest. The actual cause of fatigue is boredom caused by not using in the work all the ability the workman possesses. Such lack of interest in work makes the work monotonous and life not worth living. This is the greatest cause of fatigue, fatigue for which there is but one remedy, God's remedy. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. It is not the work that makes us tired, it is our attitude, nervous tension under which the work is done, worry, indecision, boredom, hurry due to inexperience, a sense of inferiority, and sex complexes. Those who are guilty of such sins do not need rest of body, but change of mind, and impelled interest that gives abundant energy, that cures fatigue. Overnight, can one become a new creature if he will but change his mind, see things in the right light? But if he cannot change his mind and attitude, if he cannot become interested in what he is doing, then he should change his work, move away from his home location, from his friends and relatives, from everything in which he has no interest. Fatigue does not naturally accompany old age. Energy in old age depends upon how much interest one continues to take in life and work. Energy is little dependent on physical strength, greatly dependent on emotional drive. In their old age, many great men produce work equal to that of their youth. Interest is the power that drives the dynamo. There is, however, another factor that enters into the catalogue of fatigue causes. Hard labor or excessive heat causes the body to perspire freely and thus throw off salt. Loss of salt induces fatigue. Replacing it relieves the fatigue. It is essential, however, to know the exact amount which should be taken. The Reader's Digest, September 1946, page 116 and also 115.